The movie opens with a scene at the Cafe of Love, where Trina, the owner, presents a couple with a cupcake bearing a "Will you marry me" message. The lady joyfully accepts the proposal from her boyfriend, and the two giggle in excitement. Trina congratulates them, captures a photo, and hands it to a staff member for display. She then attends to an elderly couple before her friend and manager, Paolo, provides her with a rundown of her accomplishments at the cafe. Paolo advises Trina to reduce her caffeine intake and get some rest, but she expresses her passion for love and the workload awaiting her. Paolo jokingly warns her about the confusion between the Clifton engagement and Klein's anniversary, just to make her take a rest, but Trina tells him that there are no reservations under those names. Clearly there's a catch. She appreciates Paolo's concern and promises to schedule a day off soon, although she declines to take the night off due to a busy schedule. Just then, Paolo informs her that James, their landlord, wishes to speak with her. Trina meets James and tries guessing the reason for his visit. She assumes it's to celebrate his 25th marriage anniversary, for which she has already organized a party, and he simply needs to attend. James expresses his gratitude and reveals his intention to sell the building. Trina is taken aback by this news and hastily looks for chocolate to soothe her nerves. James explains that his wife, Marnie, desires to relocate to Tucson due to the yurt, and he desires to move there too. He mentions that numerous real estate agents have approached him as the market is currently thriving, and the new owner will allow her sufficient time to vacate the premises. Trina voices her concerns about how this decision will impact her business operations. She offers to buy the building, despite being unaware of the asking price initially. James reveals the price, causing a sudden flinch from Trina, who assures him that she will have the necessary funds within 2 weeks. She excuses herself to tend to her customers. After the meeting with Trina's landlord, Paolo inquires about Trina's current activities, so she tells him about James's intention to sell the building. Curious about their next line of action, Paolo accidentally mentions the shipment of a damaged flute the previous week, surprising Trina. However, he pretends to be joking about what he just said, in order not to add to Trina's stress. Paolo later learns that Trina plans to buy the building and immediately asks for a raise, since Trina can afford such an amount of money to buy the building. Trina, however, declines the raise, as she is focused on raising funds for the building. Upon receiving a message about someone outside, Paolo informs Trina, and they leave to see the people. Paolo recognizes his college friend Pete at the entrance and introduces him to Trina, America's favorite improv comic, accompanied by his girlfriend Kim. Kim is busy taking pictures and suggests creating a hashtag for the establishment, but Trina explains their policy of refraining from phone use in the cafe to foster interpersonal connections. Pete expresses interest in the cafe and requests a space. Initially, Trina says the tables are all booked and gives them a later date, but after Paolo shows her their social media growth in a day, and Kim's likely impact when she tags them in her posts, she quickly changes her mind. She suggests table 7 for Pete and Kim, as the original occupants did not arrive. Pete expresses gratitude, and Paolo escorts them to their table. As they settle in, Kim photographs the food and requests a waitress to return it to the chef because it turned cold while she was taking pictures. Pete tries to get them to focus on their date and begins by talking about how long their relationship has lasted. Kim expresses surprise about their commitment and asks if Pete wants to propose to her. Surprisingly, Pete proposes to Kim, despite having no ring because he didn't plan to propose. Trina quickly provides something that can substitute a ring. Sadly, Kim rejects his proposal and unapologetically leaves the cafe, leaving everyone stunned. Trina assists Pete in getting out of the spotlight. Later, she offers him wine and dessert to console him. Paolo inquires about their next move, prompting Trina to suggest letting Pete stay for a while until he is ready to leave. Paolo clarifies he was referring to the cafe's situation and not Pete. Pete overhears them and asks if they have their own issues too, but Trina says no, while Paolo insists that they have an issue. He shares the situation of the cafe with Pete, who offers to organize a comedy fundraiser to support the cafe, while they will assist him in getting back with Kim. Trina respectfully declines, stating she cannot force Kim into actions she does not desire. As they debate on Pete's offer, Pete's ride arrives, so Trina bids him farewell and offers a packaged donut. Before leaving, Pete apologizes to Trina for any pressure he may have caused and expresses his desire for her assistance in winning Kim back. Trina only agrees with his statement about making her feel pressured, and he hurriedly leaves with Paolo. In the subsequent scene, Trina receives a phone call from Paolo inquiring about her progress in securing funds for the building. Trina doesn't give an encouraging response, so Paolo suggests asking her parents for help, but Trina declines. She hears the noise from Paolo's end and asks where he is. He reveals that he is watching Pete's performance. Trina reveals she understands the purpose of his call, prompting Paolo to express his desire to assist with saving the restaurant in hopes of gaining more responsibility in the cafe. Paolo encourages Trina to allow Pete to contribute to the fundraising efforts, but Trina insists that there's no way a college roommate of his can raise such an amount of money. Eventually, Paolo successfully convinces Trina to give Paolo a chance. Trina informs him that Pete will need to undergo some tests before she'll agree to anything, and she will meet with him to make sure he's serious. Excited, Paolo offers to handle the arrangements, assuring Trina that she will not regret her decision. She turns to her fish, Valentine, for its opinion, but ends up concluding by herself that it's a bad idea. The next day, Trina meets up with Pete at the basketball court. Grateful for the chance to assist in winning back Kim, Pete shares his ordeal since their breakup. Trina reveals that he doesn't look pathetic in handling heartbreak, unlike others. As they begin playing, Trina mentions that she will pose a series of questions to weigh his seriousness about rekindling the relationship with Kim. Impressed by Pete's responses, Trina agrees to help him. Pete happily jumps up, and they resume playing the games. Later, at the cafe, Paolo inquires about Trina's meeting with Pete. She reports that it went well, and she will be assisting him. Paolo cheerfully offers to give Kim's number to Trina, surprising her. Paolo explains that he got Kim's number when he booked a ride for her, and they connected on social media. He clarifies that they communicate via text, but emphasizes that Trina holds a unique place in his life, and assures her that he and Kim will never be as close as he and Trina. He shares Kim's number with Trina, who hands over the kitchen to him and leaves. At Kim's residence, Trina knocks on her door, and Kim happily welcomes her inside. Trina is surprised by the number of ring lights in Kim's house. Kim explains that she doesn't purchase them. Instead, companies send them to her. Trina reveals she brought them treats so they can talk about the engagement night, but Kim declines any sponsorship requests, saying they all go to her manager. Trina clarifies that she's not looking for a sponsorship yet, but she's hoping to find out what's going on with her and Pete. Kim tells her that what she came for is kind of personal, so Trina reveals that she brought 4 different cupcakes, prompting Kim to lead her to where they'll discuss. Kim declines any sponsorship offers. Trina inquires why Kim turned down Pete's proposal, to which Kim responds that while Pete is wonderful, he doesn't listen at all. She recounts instances where Pete failed to be attentive to her. Kim expresses that while Pete may be suitable as a boyfriend, he falls short of being husband material. Trina asks Kim if she'll give Pete another chance if she gets him to work on some of the issues she mentioned, and she happily agrees. Trina returns to the cafe and informs Paolo that she is going to do something that she rarely does. Paolo tries guessing, then Trina informs him that she is going to put him in charge of the restaurant while she is gone, but if he is going to be a jerk about it, she won't. After Paolo apologizes, Trina changes her mind and shares her plan to attend Pete's comedy performance, leaving Paolo in charge of handling the significant Wyman booking. When Paolo misquotes the details, Trina corrects him, to which he playfully responds with a jest. Trina, feeling uncertain about her decision, regrets entrusting Paolo with the restaurant's affairs. Before leaving to meet Pete, Trina seeks Paolo's opinion on her outfit for the show, and later leaves upon realizing the answer herself. Trina arrives at the venue and inquires about Pete from one of the comedians, Ken, who takes her to the location. Pete and his colleagues commence their comedy performance, which Trina and the audience thoroughly enjoy. As the show progresses, Trina internally identifies the root of the issue. Following the performance, Pete meets Trina and expresses his surprise at her presence. Trina mentions that she is there to discuss their project. Just as they are about to go share a drink, Emily, a friend and colleague of Pete, interrupts. She invites Pete to join them at the bar. Pete introduces Emily to Trina, and Emily embraces her, expressing relief that Pete has ended things with Kim. Emily attempts to speak ill of Kim, but Pete interjects, reminding her that it was Kim who ended their relationship. Trina and Pete inform Emily of their plans, and after a final embrace, Emily leaves to join her other friends. At the bar, Pete tells Trina to make any order of her choice. Trina jokingly orders an expensive drink, but Pete quickly tells her that he can't afford it, so Trina tells him that she is just kidding. Pete asks her about her day, and Trina discloses that Kim is open for a possible date, only if he changes. Trina addresses his inattentive attitude, and then Madeline, Pete's agent, interrupts them and agrees with Trina. Madeline tells Pete that his scene-stealer nature and inability to collaborate effectively with his team have hindered his chances of securing auditions with television executives. Following her remarks, Madeline leaves, and Trina compliments her. Trina encourages Pete to meet her at the pier the following day for a lesson, and they raise a toast together. The next day, Trina and Pete meet up. Trina asks him a series of questions about himself and his relationship with Kim, and gives him lessons on how to be a good listener. After the lesson, she asks Pete if he is ready for his date, because Kim has confirmed their date, and Pete responds with enthusiasm. During their date, Pete praises the sushi burrito milkshake. Kim confides in Pete about the uncomfortable situation he put her in at the cafe, mentioning her stance on not wanting to ever get married. Despite Kim mentioning it up to 3 times before, Pete had forgotten. Pete, being apologetic for his non-attentive behavior, asks Kim if there is a particular place she would like to visit, and she suggests a fascinating bonobo sanctuary in Iowa, prompting Pete to jot down her words on his phone to ensure he remembers. Initially, Kim misunderstands Pete's actions. She thinks he's texting someone after asking her a question, but Pete quickly clarifies and Kim blushes at the effort to win her back. At Trina's home, she is tending to her fish when she receives a text from James inquiring about her progress in raising funds for the building. Trina assures James that she is on track to meet the deadline. Subsequently, Pete contacts Trina for their second lesson, having secured a second date with Kim. Later, Trina meets with Pete and explains that the next lesson will focus on interpreting nonverbal cues. They observe and analyze 2 couples seated across from them and use them as a case study. Afterward, at Kim's residence, Pete apologizes for showing up unannounced. He informs her that he noticed that her pop socket is broken, so he got her a new one. Kim expresses her excitement at the thoughtful gift. Later, Trina is seen in her house engrossed in a video tutorial on acquiring a business loan. While watching the video, she receives a message from Pete praising the effectiveness of her teachings. Trina promptly replies that she is currently in a meeting and is unable to engage in texting at the moment. Despite her busy schedule, Pete persists in texting Trina and extends an invitation to attend a comedy show that evening. Eventually, Trina decides to close her laptop in order to join Pete at the event. At the comedy show, Trina watches Pete and his friends perform. They finish the show and the audience applauds them. Trina approaches Pete and he hugs her in appreciation for her presence. Madeline walks up to them and shares some good news about a scout who was among his audience. She reveals that he loved Pete's work and he is going to send out the show's booker. Madeline advises them to keep doing what they are good at and leaves. They are excited, and Pete also announces that he has sold lots of tickets. Trina appreciates his effort and asks Pete how he does the improv, so Pete offers to teach her, but she tells him that she has to leave to feed her fish. However, Pete suggests teaching Trina at home because it can be taught anywhere, and Trina agrees. When they arrive at Trina's home, Pete teaches Trina the improv. Initially, Trina is nervous, but she eventually gains confidence as Pete encourages her. As the improv session progresses smoothly, Pete playfully lifts Trina before concluding the session. Grateful for the enjoyable time, Trina expresses her appreciation to Pete, highlighting the rare joy she experienced. They discuss Trina's deep affection for the restaurant and the reasons behind it. Trina confides in Pete about Paolo's invaluable support, requesting that he keep her praise to himself so Paolo won't hear it. Pete suggests it's time to go, and Trina kindly offers to see him off, bidding each other goodnight. At the cafe, Paolo is feeling overwhelmed by the challenges of managing the restaurant, as the staff continues to make mistakes. In a moment of frustration, he accidentally drops the plate in his hand, and it shatters. Later in the basketball court, Ken inquires about Pete's relationship with Trina. Pete reveals that he experienced a weird moment with Trina the previous night. Ken suggests that it could be due to Pete's heightened adrenaline and proceeds to offer him some love advice. When Pete is asked about his feelings when he is with Kim, he responds, but he hesitates when questioned about his emotions when he is with Trina. Ken chuckles at his friend's reaction, and Pete playfully mimics his laughter before they resume their game. At the cafe, Paolo receives a call from a couple who are regular customers, informing him that they will be making a donation after learning about the fundraiser. Paolo and Trina leap up in excitement, but their show is interrupted by Pete. Paolo excuses himself, and Trina informs Pete about the donation. He congratulates her, and they share a brief moment of awkwardness. Trina feels a bit uneasy, as she briefly touches Pete's hand, talking about its softness before withdrawing and asking Pete to put on an apron in preparation for the lesson. Trina asks Pete what he thinks are the shortcomings of his proposal, but he remains speechless. Trina points out that he acted hastily and impulsively, and tells him that she'll be teaching him how to create triple love cupcakes. Following the lesson, Trina removes the cupcakes from the oven, advising Pete to allow them to cool before attempting to handle them. Despite her warning, Pete attempts to touch the hot cupcakes, resulting in a minor burn. Trina quickly tends to Pete's injury with ice and a first aid kit, sharing a tender moment before being interrupted by the timer. Trina then proceeds to demonstrate how to decorate the cupcakes with icing to Pete. They capture some photos with the cupcakes, only to be interrupted by Trina's mother. Later, Trina and her mother share a moment of uncomfortable silence. Pete attempts to break the silence, prompting Trina's mother to mention that they missed her at the recent luncheon, held in honor of her father, the mayor. Trina apologizes, mentioning her busy work schedule as the reason for her absence. Her mother then reveals that she heard of James selling the building with intentions to convert it into a luxury condominium. But Pete discloses Trina's plans to purchase the property with the help of a fundraiser. Her mother disapproves of her fundraising effort, but Trina argues that her father does the same during the campaign. As their discussion progresses, Trina's mother asks who Pete is, and he introduces himself. She focuses on her discussion with Trina and urges her to attend her father's upcoming senatorial campaign. Their discussion begins to get personal, so Pete offers to excuse himself to allow them privacy, but Trina insists he stays. Trina's mother suggests that selling the building may signify the end of a chapter in her life, encouraging her to reconsider her choices and return to her family. After delivering her message, Trina's mother leaves. Pete tries to lighten the mood by expressing his pleasure in meeting her mother, but Trina doesn't agree with him, so he ends up keeping the sentiment aside. After the meeting with Trina's mom, Trina expresses gratitude to Pete for accompanying her during her mother's visit. Pete is surprised to learn that she is the daughter of the mayor. Curious about her upbringing as the mayor's daughter, Pete inquires about her past experiences. Trina elaborates on the pressure of perfection she faced growing up, which led her to pursue a career in matchmaking. When Pete inquires about her romantic life, she confesses that she has been preoccupied with running the restaurant and neglected her own needs. She tries to make Pete see her as an ordinary person who isn't doing much, but Pete tells her that he was a hot mess before he met her. He adds that he's been a better person ever since he met her. Sharing a moment, Trina mentions she needs to feed her pet fish and prepares to leave. Although they bid farewell, they lingered briefly before eventually leaving. At the cafe, Trina concludes a phone call and approaches Paolo to inquire about his current activities. Trina points out an error he made, but Paolo focuses on inquiring about her well-being. Trina assures him she is doing well and mentions that the fundraiser is progressing smoothly. Paolo stares at her skeptically, prompting Trina to move towards the counter to organize things in an effort to distract Paolo's investigation. Despite this, Paolo continues to approach her, maintaining his intense stare. Trina questions his attitude, and Paolo reveals that he viewed CCTV footage of her and Pete baking triple love cupcakes, noting a certain chemistry between them. Trina attempts to justify her actions, but Paolo points out that he doesn't feel much chemistry whenever they bake. Trina reminds him that her interactions with Pete are strictly professional and don't involve any romantic feelings. Paolo clarifies that he didn't mean to say she has feelings for Pete. However, he inquires whether Trina has feelings for Pete. Unwilling to talk further, Trina excuses herself to go meet Kim. Trina meets Kim and she asks her to be brief as she needs to review products. Trina assures her she will be swift and inquires about her relationship with Pete. Kim replies positively and thanks Trina for visiting. As their discussion progresses, Kim receives a message and invites Trina to stay longer, offering her some homemade lemonade. She mentions finding the recipe online and praises the internet for its usefulness. Kim then hands Trina an under-eye brightener to test. She asks for Trina's opinion about Pete, but Trina can't give an actual answer. Kim suggests they continue the conversation inside the house since they are near the pool. Trina admires Kim's home and asks about the financial benefits of the internet, to which Kim agrees that it pays well. Kim removes her eyebrow mask and asks Trina for her thoughts on Pete. Trina reassures her that Pete is a good match and they will be happy together. Suddenly, Kim's phone rings, but she tells Trina to ignore it. Just then, Trina notices a message from Paolo, telling Kim to keep Trina there longer, leading her to understand Kim's sudden hospitality and makeup offer. She also reads a text from Paolo, reporting a fire at the cafe, prompting her to rush off. Trina and Kim arrive at the cafe. Trina inquires about everyone's well-being and questions Paolo about the cause of the fire outbreak. Paolo explains that the staff is unaware of the cause, but one of the staff clarifies that Paolo left a candle too close to the drapes, causing the fire outbreak. Out of anger, Paolo fires the lady for disclosing the details of the fire outbreak. Trina calls out to the staff as she leaves, telling her that she isn't fired as her services are still needed. Trina admonishes Paolo for the incident, stating that this is why she doesn't want to leave the restaurant in his care. Suddenly, Pete arrives in a funny manner, surprising Kim. Kim questions Pete's willingness to risk running through fire to rescue people. However, Pete responds nonchalantly, stating that he only expected smoke but would indeed rescue individuals if necessary. Kim, deeply impressed, kisses Pete on the cheeks, while Pete inquires about the incident with Trina, who is equally confused. Kim seems to care less about the whole situation, so she begins a live video, falsely narrating how Pete heroically saved her from a burning building. Confusion ensues among the group when Kim unexpectedly kneels and proposes to Pete. Pete stammers and hastily runs away from the restaurant, followed by Trina. Trina meets up with Pete and asks his reasons for rejecting Kim's proposal. Pete explains that Kim caught him off guard, but Trina points out that he did the same to Kim 2 weeks ago. Pete defends his actions. Trina questions if he truly desires it, to which Pete responds that he did initially, but his choice has changed. When asked how he currently feels, Pete is unable to give a response and abruptly leaves to play basketball. Trina goes back to the cafe where Paulo inquires about Pete and the likelihood of him participating in the fundraiser. Trina admits she is uncertain. Subsequently, Kim calls the police to file a missing person report. Trina and Paulo don't pay attention to her as they're trying to save the cafe. Trina instructs Paulo to ensure the matter remains confidential to prevent the landlord from knowing about the incident. Just then, she receives a call from James, who discloses that the security company informed him about the situation, but Trina downplays it as a minor occurrence. However, James regretfully informs her that he must sell the building due to high insurance costs. Trina begs him to wait until she can gather the necessary funds by the end of the month, but James has made up his mind, so he ends the call. Trina then asks Paulo about the possibility of donors covering the remaining money, but unfortunately, Paulo tells her that the donors' money will not be sufficient. Later in the day, while Pete and his friends are rehearsing, he appears distracted. When they ask the reason for the distraction, he assures them that everything is fine. Ken reminds him of the upcoming visit from the booker and emphasizes the need for preparation. He advises Pete to stop his mindless scrolling on his phone, prompting him to apologize for his behavior. Just then, Pete's phone falls on the ground and Emily picks it up. She stumbles upon a picture of Pete and Trina, leading her to suspect that something is going on between them. Ken urges them to continue with the rehearsal, but Pete remains absent-minded, so the rehearsal ends immediately. Later, after the rehearsal, as Pete enters his car, he contacts Ken for a favor. He later goes to Kim's house, where he expresses remorse for his actions and acknowledges that she deserves someone who could meet her needs. Kim agrees with him, as they mark the end of whatever romantic relationship they had with jokes and laughter. Meanwhile, at the cafe, Trina asks Paulo about the Weingartners, a client of theirs, as he recollects specific details about them. He asks Trina about her plans regarding their current situation, prompting her to share her intentions of establishing a food truck. As they discuss, Paulo expresses remorse for his previous actions, acknowledging his overconfidence and eagerness to do things his way. Trina accepts his apology as they prepare to close the restaurant, also offering her own apology for being overly controlling. Suddenly, Pete surprises Trina from behind, accompanied by his friends. He announces their decision to organize the fundraiser and tells Trina about his plans, stating his desire to support those he cares for. Despite Trina's attempt to change the strategy, Pete insists on his idea, urging her to allow others to look out for her. The fundraiser commences with Pete and his colleagues launching their comedy show. Pete invites Paulo to join them on stage for a game, followed by Trina. As the game begins, Pete admires Trina's beauty, expresses his deep feelings for her, and how she has positively impacted his life. He declares his love for her and asks her out. Trina happily agrees and playfully challenges him to a basketball game, promising to win whenever they play. Just then, Paulo joyfully announces that they have raised enough funds to purchase the building, leading the crowd to cheer and applaud. Trina and Pete share a kiss as the audience erupts in more cheers. In the following scene, Trina is seen taking shots with James and holding the key to the building. She poses for pictures with Pete, holding a board that reads, "Grand Reopening, Cafe of Love."